I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, those of you who are here in person as well as online. My iPad here that has all my notes is giving me a little bit of a reverb, but hopefully you can't hear it. Okay, I'm Sarah Ades. Yes, you can. I'm going to close this for a second, then I'll sort it out. Okay, that sounds better. No, it doesn't. Okay, that's better. So I'm the Associate Dean for Student Affairs with the grad school. And part of my job is to help provide career and professional development programming to graduate students. And we're partnering with the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. Jennifer Nicholson is the Director for Postdoctoral Affairs, who's also working with us on this event. And I want to open with a big thank you to the Graduate School Alumni Society Board, who is supporting this event and promoting this event and helped us organize this event. So for all of the Alumni Society board members in the room, can you please raise your hands? Here they are. One day, you who are grad students in the room can also be a Graduate School Alumni Society board member. So today we're here to have a conversation about networking, mentoring, and sponsorship, and how you can use that for success in your careers, whether you're academic or wanting to go into industry. We have people who are up here to have this conversation who represent expertise in these areas and can also tell you about how these skills, these ways of working with others, you can really leverage them to promote your career and what you want to do and where you want to go in your life. I fully want this to be a conversation where we will be talking amongst ourselves, but we want to engage you as well. So as we start talking, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll come out with a mic and you can join in the conversation. It shouldn't just be you all just watching us talk to each other. That's our intent today. There are people online and the only way they can hear is through the microphone, so I will bring the microphone out to people if you want to ask a question. So just to start with, who in the room is a current graduate student? Okay, who's a postdoc? Welcome. You're not alone. Who's from the STEM side of the university? How about humanities? Great. So here's another question. We're going to be talking about networking, mentoring, and sponsorship, which involves engaging conversations with other people and people you might not know, who, when they think of the thought of going up to a stranger to tell them about yourself and to potentially try to build connections, that thought terrifies them. Okay, I'm fine talking to anyone. I'll go up to whoever on the street and start a conversation. Okay, that gives us some landscape. And then here's one other. Who is thinking about a career in academics? How about a career in industry? Okay, how about I'm not sure? How about let's just get through grad school or get through this postdoc and I'll deal with it later. Great. Okay, so enough from me. My background, I'm a microbiologist, biochemist. I ran a research lab. I taught, mentored grad students, mentored undergrads, did the faculty thing for 16 years, and then took the job in the grad school and have switched from looking at bacteria on petri dishes to working with students who I can converse with. And have conversations with, and I've really enjoyed that switch in my career. I'm going to introduce my fellow Associate Dean in the grad school, Dr. Stephanie Preston. Stephanie, you want to say a little bit about yourself and what brings you here?
Sure. So my name is Stephanie Danette Preston. I am the Associate Dean for Graduate Educational Equity and Chief Diversity Officer for Graduate Education. I am co-moderating this panel with my colleague, Dr. Ades. Hope to bring to the conversation sort of this perspective around diversity, equity, and inclusion and how we incorporate that into sort of our networking engagement outside of sort of our comfortable spaces or our affinity groups.
Great. And then I will next introduce Leslie Jackson, who works with me in the Graduate School Office of Student Affairs, and she is our expert on networking.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Leslie Jackson. I am the Associate Director for Graduate Student Career and Professional Development, which is a bit of a mouthful. But I just came on board to the graduate school quite recently in August, and I work with Dr. Ades and Dr. Preston in the graduate school. Hopefully you'll be seeing more of me, especially those of you who raised your hand interested in going into a career in industry. I'm not new to Penn State. I worked in career services for 9 years across campus. And before that, I had a career in more of a corporate environment. So I've had kind of a varied career in both an academic environment and a corporate environment. So I'm coming from kind of different perspectives than some of my colleagues on campus. That's it.
Great. And if you see us moving a little bit, there's a bee that just flew up on stage. So a lesson in whatever you do, you need to be prepared for the unexpected.
Okay.
Tiffany is our expert on mentorship here, who has perspectives from both sides of being mentee and being a mentor.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Kanarum. I am a user experience researcher at Google. I completed my PhD just last year, actually, from information sciences and technology. So here I am. There is another side to this. You can get through it. Yeah, so I'll be chatting a little bit about like mentorship, and part of my job at Google actually is mentoring like interns. I was an intern, so I have a lot of perspectives that I can share with you all and answer some questions. So look forward to it.
Great. And Dan is with us to take on the sponsorship piece.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Azera, and I did my graduate work here at Penn State in food science. And after completing my degree, I went to industry and worked not too far down the road at the Hershey Company. And I was there for about 27 years and retired in 2012. I made my way back to the university, where I now have a faculty chair position. It's like an executive in residence type position. And I have a teaching professor appointment, and I'm also the director of entrepreneurship and innovation in the College of Ag Sciences. So it's great to be here today. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And then I'd also like to introduce Jocelyn, who is here, also a Penn State grad, and she gives the perspective from being a faculty member, as well as having some experience in industry, and how all of these three can kind of come together in the different spaces.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Pena. I'm an assistant professor of computer science at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a liberal arts school. Like Tiffany, I'm an alum of the College of IST. I graduated in 2015 with my master's and in 2020 with my PhD. I'm super excited to be here. And yeah, I'm ready for the conversation.
Great. So I thought I'd get us started by just posing a question. These three things are kind of similar, but yet they're different. So I think it's important just to start out definitionally and have our three experts in the different areas talk about what their view of what is networking, mentoring, and sponsorship. So we can start with networking, because I think that's the first step often on the way.
Yeah, I think so. I think networking can be a little scary, especially those of you who might have raised your hands when you said, I'm not too crazy about the idea of walking up to somebody on the street. I like to encourage you to think about networking in a slightly different way. It doesn't always have to be somebody who you have never met before in your life. It could be somebody very familiar to you. So when I think of networking, I first think of pooling all of the resources around you that you might already be familiar with. So it could be the folks sitting in this room, your fellow graduate students, who do they know? You know, your colleagues sitting next to you, the professors that you're connected with, who do they know? Professional associations that, you know, maybe that you interact with. Even neighbors back home, you know, whoever you're associated with back home, cousins, older siblings. Even though you're not connected to some of these folks in a professional sense, doesn't mean you can't connect with them and ask questions about who they know and make connections in a professional way. And so make a list. You know, I think of professional networking as starting out with that closer circle of people and start making lists of people who might be people to contact. And so the idea with professional networking is starting with that inner circle. And then of course you can grow, you know, go out further with that. And part of networking could also, of course, be reaching out to people who may be unfamiliar to you and you're kind of cold calling in a sense and reaching out to those folks. And I think the other piece of this here is understanding that you want to be careful depending on your relationship with that person to start with. So if this is your cousin, you might be able to ask a little bit more right off the bat because there's a familiarity versus the person you don't know at all. Being careful with what you ask right away and understanding that there's a leveling up there that has to happen with that relationship and being very strategic. And so if I don't have a whole lot of connection with that person, I'm not going to right away ask for the big things like, can you introduce me to all the people you know and give me the inside track on everything? And so that's the other key with networking, is being very strategic with what is my relationship with this person? How well do we know each other? And therefore, what can I ask at this point? Or do I need to take a few steps back? And step one is just let them get to know me first. And then kind of baby step towards, baby step towards asking for additional things as we get to know each other a little bit more. So those are the kinds of things I think about when I think of professional networking and some of the basic ideas and basic keys to networking.
So mentorship, how is it different?
Oh yeah, there we are. Okay, great. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me. So I feel like mentorship is kind of like the next stage of this, right? Like you've reached out to somebody, you have a conversation with them, and mentorship to me is like a lot more like going into, you know, more like of a long-term engagement, learning from someone who you admire in some way, whether that's, you know, for trying to find like what kind of job you want to do, maybe trying to get different type of expertise. And you can, you know, that person and you kind of like have more of a relationship. I feel like it's more like more casual and more like more honest, honestly. Like if you go into a mentoring relationship with somebody, you know, you need to be honest about your intent, you need to be honest about what you want out of it, and, you know, hopefully the person who's giving you the advice, the information is doing the same, right? So it's this back and forth conversation that you're having, you know, to, you know, improve yourself as a mentee, and like hopefully also the mentor will learn something as well, right? Like everybody has something to offer. So it's, the way I see it is it's more of a like exchange, right? You know, when I think about mentoring and like kind of going into networking even, it's like if I was to mentor, for example, an intern, like this is a future colleague of mine, right? So this isn't somebody I just, you know, give information to and say, okay, have a nice day. You know, hopefully it's more of like a long-term thing where this person can like kind of guide you through parts of your career. There's different types of mentorship. Some of it is very much like a one-off. Like for example, the intern that I mentored over the summer, you know, I met with her a few times. I gave her advice on like how to deal with her internship. With this thing, you know, now we have a connection. Now if you need something in the future, now if you're curious about something, you know, you can reach out to me. We have a relationship and I'm much more inclined to continue to support. You know, so that's how I see mentorship, is more like, you know, a give and take that gets a little bit deeper than just, you know, trying to meet somebody for like networking. It's more like the depth rather than the breadth. Does that make sense?
Okay. And I know I've been in settings when, we talk about a mentor could be a sponsor, but they don't have to be sponsors. So what does sponsorship really mean?
The way I would describe sponsorship is it's someone who is a champion for you or advocates for you when you're not in the room. So think about a group of more senior, say, members of an industry or in academia, and they're in a room and they're deciding who are we going to put on this particular project or activity? Who are we going to send to training at a particular program that's high level? So when you think of that and then you say your name comes up by a particular person that's in the room, that person is acting as your sponsor. So how do you get to that point where someone will be your sponsor, be your champion when you're not present? And I think the way I would look at that is to say, how do I interact with my immediate supervisor? And then how does that supervisor communicate to those above that position? And it gets back to your performance. High performance leads to more champions, leads to more opportunities. And for me, being in industry for so long, it really was apparent when you see senior managers talking about the succession plan, and who's going to succeed a vice president, or who's going to be the successor to the chief marketing officer or a director of some activity in the industry you're in. And when your name comes up, someone's acting as your sponsor, and then they'll put the effort behind that to be sure that you're successful.
I kind of see almost, that's kind of where I see the lines between professional networking and sponsorship kind of crossing there too, because you have to be vocal. Professional networking, by the way, never stops. Even when you get a job, it still doesn't stop. And I see kind of almost advocating for yourself. And so you're not going to know, as my supervisor, you're not going to know what my career goals are and what I'm interested in if I'm not advocating for myself to you so that you can advocate for me on the other side, right? And that I see that still almost as a form of networking. Even if that person is my supervisor, kind of letting that person know my career directions and what I'm interested in doing, so that that person, when they're in a meeting or when they're talking with somebody and an opportunity comes up or a project comes up, I have this person who would be perfect for that role. So it's never something that really should stop. Don't narrowly think of networking as just, okay, I'm on the job market, I need to get a job. It's a promotion of self. Whereas I think sponsoring is more you're promoting someone else, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So I think a really cool way to do this is kind of networking. It's like socializing your work, whether you're in your PhD program, whether you're a professor, whether you're in industry, just really like socializing your work. You get a paper in, you post about that on Twitter. You try to get people interested. That's what I do. Some paper gets accepted. All the people who I think are interested, I tag them on Twitter. I'm like, cool paper, like check it out, Try to get people to see that I'm doing something, right? And like at work, it's the same thing. If I publish a study, I send it to all the other researchers on my team. Hey, look, this, work came out, like check out what I'm doing. Because it builds these kind of like latent connections. Maybe people talk to you, maybe they don't. If you give a presentation, if you have these opportunities, just take them, because you never know who you're going to meet through that. And like talking about your work is oftentimes a lot easier than talking about yourself. So if you can get folks interested in your work, it could be an easier way to start a conversation, to start building a relationship with that person.
You have an opportunity to build sponsors as your career progresses. And you're going to be having meetings with your supervisor or manager, and that's where you advocate for yourself, and you talk to them about your career goals and plan out that progression. But as your career progresses, and there's more competition, if you will, for these positions, it also falls back to you to be a high performer, to be sure that you are getting things done, and that people look to you to get things done, and then you become a person that everyone starts to advocate for. So not only your manager, but then your manager's manager, et cetera, they say, oh yeah, we see this person gets things done and has a lot of positive recommendations behind them, we'll be their sponsor. Even if they may not even know you, which is kind of interesting because they just hear it up the line that you're a good performer and you get things done.
I would imagine the real sweet spot with sponsorship is you have sponsors and they don't even know that they're your sponsors.
Exactly.
They're just out there.
That's right, and that
promoting
happens.
you. Yeah.
Because they've heard about your performance all the way up the line, and they want to meet you, and they want to be your sponsor as well.
So thinking back to when you were in grad school, and it all sounds great. Like once you have the network and you have your mentors and sponsors, but how do you even start? Like, Jocelyn, do you have any experiences of how you got things going? Or
Yeah, so I know this is going to sound difficult at first because we've been in a pandemic for 2 years, which makes things a little bit hard to do. But going to conferences is going to conferences, trying to put yourself in situations where you're meeting people, whether you volunteer to be on a panel, you volunteer service-wise to help out as a volunteer in some way, where people get to know you through your work. And it's kind of what Dan was saying or alluding to is your performance kind of speaks volumes about who you are and like your work ethic and how you perform. And so people take note of that. So I think very early on, I started going to conferences pretty much as soon as I could and meeting different people. And so right now I have a mentor and a sponsor who I met 10 years ago, and I've had him be one of my advocates when I'm not in the room, which has been super powerful for me in my career. So he mentions my name if, hey, they're looking for a reviewer for this journal, Jocelyn, right? Or they're looking for a panelist for an NSF proposal program, Jocelyn, right? And sorry, it's really cool, right? And so I would say conferences are the big way to do that, trying to get your name involved in like reviewing even. So people that work in editing, if you're interested in that, like they'll recognize, hey, you're a really good reviewer. I'm gonna toss this up to you, or I'm gonna think of you down the line if like you wanna be an editor of that journal or like an organizing committee member of a conference. I also think, getting into that conference land too, you start having natural networking conversations. So at reception, so we're having a reception right after this, which is where you'll practice some of this. But like kind of putting yourself in this uncomfortable situation if you can. And I think, if you create situations where you're meeting folks and then you see that same person at the same conference every year, and I've seen someone at the same conference for 10 years. And we're like, let's go get a beer, like, let's go. And that person thinks of me if like, hey, I know that you're interested in computer science education. Like, you should think about this opportunity, or I'm gonna mention your name here, and vice versa, right? So I think, conferences are really that big kind of way to do that. Workshops or any other way that you can get yourself involved. And it doesn't necessarily have to be discipline specific. Of course, that's good, but maybe there are other opportunities out there that are just sort of general academic opportunities and events that you can go to that can help with that too.
Broaden your network or broaden those experiences or tap into sort of areas where you haven't tapped into before. How would you use your social capital to sort of broaden your network, broaden the experiences, using that to tap into other things and to add on to it and not sound thirsty?
That's the key.
Sorry.
I feel like that's tough.
want to phone a friend?
I almost want to toss it to Tiffany, because Tiffany has had this experience like coming from industry. Like I think it's a little bit different for me. So I guess to preface this, like I'm in academia. However, I'm at an undergraduate only institution. And so what that means is like I do research just with undergrads. And so I don't even have that situation where I might get master's students or PhD students that are constantly emailing me to say, I want to work with you. I get undergrads. And so like that might be a little bit different. But I would say in general, like I would say PhD students though who are thinking about going into academia as like faculty, I get those emails though too. So like, hey, I'm interested in the liberal arts. What does that look like? I want to be a faculty member in general. How does that look like in terms of your teaching load, your research load, and then like your service? So I get those a lot, but they're not thirsty. They're not there yet, but I know Tiffany might have more insight there.
I can talk in a second. We have a question.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sanjana Mindu. I'm a third year PhD student. God, I wish I was first year still, please. I'm teaching first year, so I get it. Anyway, so I'm a third year PhD student in IST. So my question is, these are all great strategies, but as someone who started their PhD during the pandemic in fall of 2020, and then kind of coming to third year where you're thinking about internships, your dissertation, kind of wrapping up this journey, it almost feels like I'm still at the beginning when it comes to all of this professional stuff. So I guess, how do you recommend kind of making up for that lost ground, or is it kind of okay to be at ground zero with the context of everything? I guess, how does it look from the mentor, sponsor, providing people's perspective for people in my position?
Right. I could talk a little bit about social capital, which is where we were going with this. I think that makes a big difference, right? Like, granted, for folks during the pandemic, it was a lot harder to like build a cohort with your fellow students, but everybody's back in person now, right? So like some of that can begin, and like you've taken classes together. There's been some opportunities here and there. Like even when I started my job, I was remote at first, and so I knew everybody, but I didn't really know them. So when I finally met them in person, I was able to start building a relationship with them. And I think one of the cool things you can do as PhD students right now is like, look around to all the other folks in your program or in adjacent programs. Like these are your future colleagues, right? So these are people that you can build relationships with right now that you can use to support each other in your, current PhD. And then as, so-and-so's finding a job, so-and-so's finding a job, maybe this person can connect you here, can connect you there. That's, I think, what is meant by the social capital part. And then also like looking towards the alumni of your program. So people who are already there, already doing it, those folks usually are a lot more willing to help out like people from their program, from their alma mater. So like that's a really great way to do it as well. And with those types of reach outs, it's totally fine to like message somebody on LinkedIn, say, hey, I'm with the same program, this is my advisor, I'm doing this type of work, I've heard that you're in this area, I'm super curious about this, would you have time to tell me more? And you can make the ask even very short, right? So 15 minutes. We have 15 minutes to tell me a little bit more. Do you have some links? Do you have anything you can share with me? And I think that's like really great. Plus one to the conference thing. That's literally how I built so many connections. Granted, it was before the pandemic, but afterwards I was a student volunteer for some of the major conferences, and we had a little Slack channel, and I've met a few of them at conferences that have been in person since. And some of them actually were interns at Google, so I met them there. So like these opportunities, people keep coming up over and over again. And the more people you can like reach out to with your network, even here at Penn State, the more likely you are to find someone who maybe knows someone who can put you in touch with someone who can help you.
So you use this example all the time, and at some point I have to use something different because it's probably going to date me. But how many of you have heard of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? You've heard of Kevin Bacon, I hope. Please tell me you've heard of Kevin Bacon.
They recognize his face, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, okay. The idea here, he's a famous actor, for those of you who don't know. Okay. And the idea here is that we're all separated by only 6 people or so from Kevin Bacon, from anybody really, right? And so, somebody who knows somebody, you have an incredible web, whether you realize it or not. Maybe you feel like you know nobody in that field, right? But to Tiffany's point, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, okay? And that, even those, couple of degrees, you wouldn't even believe, especially being a Penn Stater, You wouldn't believe how far you can go in getting into to companies, organizations, academia, et cetera, and getting into to network with people, okay? So that's the first thing. I think the other thing, you know, when you're reaching out to people who, like I was saying before, and like Tiffany just mentioned, when you're reaching out to people you don't know, you got to baby step it and be careful what you ask. I personally like to say, you know, let's just stick with what you know. I don't want you to give me anything too much more than that. Just tell me give me your opinion about, you know, what you think about this organization. I'd love to hear about how you're doing in your job, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, because that's a little easier to give than, you know, give me a contact, you know, do a resume review for me. That's a little bit much, right? But, you know, really think about this in terms of, you know, who people can get you to. Because it is really, we could talk about a network, it's a spider web. It's a spider web of people, and how many people you need to talk to that person that really you need to get to. There were a lot of people when I was doing a career change and wanted to get, you know, on campus and do this kind of work. I talked to a lot of duds before I got to the people I really needed to talk to. But they weren't really duds because they got me to the people I needed to talk to. Even though they didn't give me a whole lot of information, they got me to the contacts. And now when I went to that person I didn't know, I wasn't just going to the person I didn't know. I was going to them and saying, your colleague so-and-so told me to reach out to you. And now they're much more likely to return my call, my email, my whatever. And so that's a really important thing to understand. And then the final thing I will say is that be prepared. Well, this is going to be a little harsh, but be prepared for rejection, meaning being prepared for people to not get back to you. And that's okay. Because you can do everything right and formulate that message on LinkedIn perfectly, and they just don't get back to you. Because of whatever reason, they're busy, they don't check their LinkedIn account as often. 5,000 reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with you, that you did something wrong. So it's a little bit of a law of numbers game, you know, like you have to make sure that you're reaching out to a lot of people. Yes, you can reach back to that person who didn't get back to you, you know, a week or two later, just checking in. But don't take it personally and keep moving on, because you will get some people. So you kind of have to move on from those folks who just don't reach back out, because do you want them to reach back out to you anyway if they're not paying attention? And so keep moving on and try to put that behind you and move forward.
To get back to, I think, the pandemic question too, the students I've talked with have mentioned that it seems like you have to work harder to build your network. You have to dig deeper, work harder. And I think also you need to better understand where your work, your research fits, and what value you're going to bring to somebody in industry or academia. And kind of explore where is that? You know, where do I fit? Where does my research actually fit, and be more efficient about where you're going to be contacting people? Because, you know, we can't go to conferences. We didn't. Now hopefully we'll be able to, but we didn't go to conferences. We didn't build these networks like we usually did. So we have to be online in some fashion, and so we got to be more efficient, and we've got to understand where we fit best so that we can be more focused. And you know, the students I've seen do that have had more success rather than usually spreading out a wide net.
I was just going to say, since you're in the College of IST and it's known to be really interdisciplinary, you might have several different communities or associations or several different disciplines that like you might be interested in, or that your work kind of fits in several disciplines. And I think that's actually a plus, because then you can actually figure out like where is my home, whether that be academically, research-wise. So I have several homes. So I do computer science education-ish, and so like I have two main conferences that are like my homes, but my primary conference when I was coming up was CHI, because I was in HCI, in human-computer interaction. So I feel like if you are in an area where it's really interdisciplinary and like you can benefit from that, like try to find your home and go and try to network with different groups of people in those different disciplines and areas, and then you will eventually find a place that's your home, whether that be research-wise, academic-wise, or industry-wise, and that's just a place that you're going to go to and lean on all the time for support, and eventually hopefully find that group of people that support you in that way.
So one thing you could do, which I started doing, which has actually been kind of valuable, is use Twitter.
Yes.
Like, however you feel about Twitter is whatever, but you can use it for academic reasons, right? So I have, like, my Twitter is academic. So I've friended or followed all of the people in the communities that I participate in. You know, a lot of students, a lot of professors, like people at all different levels, right? And so, you know, and I post things and I comment on things, and like it's a really great way to like build connections with other academics and other people in your area without having to do really much work, right? So you like read their tweets and you respond to them. You can look at, you know, interesting papers that come out. You know, you can tag them in things that you find useful and just get conversations going like that. And that's something you can do from home. You know, so if you don't have a Twitter, consider creating one and just finding people in your field, following your conferences, following different events in your field. Like there's a lot of, like I do user experience research in the industry, and there's a ton of events. So I follow those too, and it's like something comes up, that sounds cool, maybe I'll go. You know, a lot of these things are virtual now, which is awesome. You know, previously they were mostly in the Bay Area in California, and so when I first moved here, I couldn't go to any of them. But now, like, that's one of the benefits of the pandemic, right? If there is benefit, like, things are virtual now, so that you can attend, you can do stuff. So yeah, make a Twitter if you don't already have one.
Thank you, panelists, for your time coming to talk to us today. And my question kind of surrounds social media in a bit, and it ties into the social capital and the utility of it. I see a lot of, I'm in biology, third year, so I understand the pandemic situation too. I felt you, homegirl, yes. And so with that free amount of time, I guess my question is, what is the utility of social media in this age to building these kind of like networking and finding mentors and then finding advocates? Like if you have a sponsor in a room, is that something that might be used as fodder to say this person can check some of these boxes? Because I started thinking about, I love biology, I love science, I'm a marine biologist, and so I put a lot of my passion and interest into that, and then articulating that through social media, right? So it's articulating science, trying to share and increase this kind of interest in STEM in a way, right? That's the kind of utility of it. But is that something, as a grad student, that's going to be the most effective use of my time? Is that something that can apply to getting me into a job down the road? Thank you.
Something about that. So definitely social media, get yourself out there. There's plenty of scientists, academics. I said microbiologist, biochemist. So there's that whole side that's doing that. Then there's some people like me who, like, I have a Twitter account. I'm still trying to figure out, like, how do I actually see who I'm following? So you have to go old school as well, because you want to network also with people in your field who might not be on that, particularly if you want to head into the academic side of things. So my tip is, if you have opportunities to present, to go to meetings, always present. Don't say, oh, I don't want to make a poster, I'm scared to talk or whatever. Get yourself out there and work really hard to make it fantastic so that you give that talk and people remember that. And people can come up to you afterwards, and you can, when you go up and you're just standing around trying to figure out, okay, I want to just go in this corner by myself. Make yourself go up to people. If you've given that great talk, they'll have questions for you. And if your talk was just so-so, join the conversation. Say who you are. Force yourself at meals to go sit with people you don't know and talk to people. And here's a question for y'all too. It's easy to do it with other grad students. At what point do you realize, okay, there's this, faculty member, maybe I want to do a postdoc with them. should I go sit with them at breakfast? How do I make those connections? And that, I think, goes into any field. So I'll pass that on to our panel.
Media thing, yes. Like, honestly, yes. Like, the more people can like associate your name with some sort of brand, which is what you're putting out there when you post things on Twitter, you know, whatever, the better it is. Like, and it comes, you know, it comes up in all kinds of things. Like, you're on the job hunt and people search your name, like you can in a way curate what comes up with that. You know, it's like if your Twitter is really active, maybe that's one of the first things that come up. Your website, maybe it matches, you know, kind of the same thing you have on your Twitter, you know, whatever other like, you know, venue that you use, like your Google Scholar, like all of this, right, is all part of your brand. And the more people can see you like engaging with your community, engaging with the area that you eventually want to be in, like the better it is. Like, that's definitely not going to hurt you. Unless you're saying things that are super, super controversial, maybe then. But if you're talking about science, you know, you're talking about like what you do in your work and, you know, you're engaging in that way, like that's super awesome. And that's like a great way, you know, like, and I know like people do this, like, you know, when they're hiring, people, you know, they won't probably say that I hire my friend, but like they'll hire somebody that they've heard of. You know, given that there's 3 people in the room, it's like, oh, that person's work I know. Oh, I see them, they're super active on here, and like it's super cool conversations. They seem like really interesting. Let's give them another, you know, a shot. So like, it's definitely a good idea.
That as you're progressing in your career, and you know, first you're looking to be hired, and then you have built your you're building your network. You have mentors and sponsors. These folks are looking at not only what you do, in other words, are you getting things done, are you achieving your objectives, but they're also looking at how you do it. Like, what are your personal traits? Do you align with the values of a particular company? And this doesn't change when you're on social media, but it's different, right? So when you're interacting with people at a conference, or you're you know, at work in a meeting face to face, that's different than when you're, you know, on Zoom or social media and representing yourself that way. But people are looking at not only what you do, but how you do it. And that idea that you have these values and these characteristics that people are looking for is just as important on social media, but it's represented in a different way.
I want to add to both points. So Tiffany was talking about creating a brand, and I think that's actually super powerful in the way that she articulated that, because I think essentially that's true. One thing you could do, I've seen people create like hashtags for themselves. Oh, wow, really? And yeah, and like if you click the hashtag, it's like everything that they've said, like curated, like you said, and I think that's really cool to do. The other thing I would say too is I'm also on Twitter academically, and I don't post as much, I kind of lurk. However, I do find it useful because more than likely, like there's been many times that I've actually seen calls out for papers or special issues or conferences that I don't see anywhere online, and I get to see that first on Twitter. Yeah. Also jobs. And so people will be more inviting informally on Twitter and say, just DM me. Yeah. And I find that all the time, like, here's an internship at Microsoft, here's an internship. Like, it's actually super overwhelming, and I would say in some cases better than LinkedIn, like in that way. So, and by the way, we're hiring at McAllister for a tenure track position, so come and talk to me if you. I'll tell you where we're hiring.
Example, you know, when I'm talking to students about job searching, and this kind of applies to networking as well. So when I'm talking to students about job searching, they ask me, so where's the best place to look for a job? I think they want me to tell them what's the place. Like, is it Indeed? Is it LinkedIn? And the answer is there's not a place. There's not one single place. Any place, all of those places. Go to the company website itself. Go to McAllisters.edu, right? McAllister.edu, right? It's a lot of different places. And it's also about talking to people too. You know, we're talking about networking. It's also about having conversations because not all jobs are posted. And so this conversation about using social media, not using social media, this all kinds of feeds into this point that whether it's networking, you know, posting or kind of marketing or whatever you want to call it, your research, et cetera, the more diversity you have, the better. And you really want to make sure that when you're networking, you're using, yes, use LinkedIn, it's great, but also use your professional associations, use the physical people around you. Like I was saying before, use the personal connections you have. So again, diversify the pools, because they overlap in some places, but they don't overlap in all places, right? Marketing your research, making sure that you're using all, because you want to reach all different people. Not everybody uses Twitter. Right? And so it's really important that as much as you can, you don't want to drive yourself too crazy here, but as much as you can, try not to just stick to one thing in whatever you're doing. It's really important to understand that, the wider the net you cast in some ways, I think the more people you are going to reach. The question about, I think what you were asking, Dr. Ades, was about how to walk up to that faculty member. I think about the students who say, how do I walk up to that employer at a fair? What do I say? And, the first thing I will tell you is that I can guarantee you that faculty member is a human being, okay? I have not met any faculty members who are not human beings, so we can guarantee that. Well, okay, right? Never say never. Dr. Ades said it, I didn't. And, at the end of the day, you're going to have your difficult people and your easy to get along with people, and they're going to be everywhere. But at the end of the day, it's just you're walking up to somebody and trying to have a conversation. Just because they have certain initials and oodles of years of experience attached to them, at the end of the day, they're a person that you're walking up to and having to have a conversation. So try to keep that in mind. And what do you say when you walk up to somebody you don't know and you'd like to get to know? What do you say? I'm asking you. Hi, I'm so-and-so. What else do you say? I'm asking you, audience. What do you say? This is the audience participation portion. It's not a trick question, I promise. Come on, you third years out there. I know you're in the room. Compliment their work. Do you walk up to people and compliment their work when you meet them?
Hi, I've heard all about you.
Do you really do that?
Somebody did it to me at a conference. It was very off-putting.
Yes. Do you really walk? What's your name right now? What's your name? Neil. Hi, Neil. I'm Leslie. How are you today?
Well, how about you?
I'm doing okay. I'm not going to walk up to Neil. Neil, I'm very impressed by your work. Right? Okay. Now you may have the inside goods on that person, know all their work and everything, but you're walking up to them and saying, "Hi, how are you today? How's your meal that you're eating, or how are you enjoying this conference, or whatever." Remember that, okay? That's what you want to keep in mind. Yes, you can get into talking about their research and how you connect and all that, but start with that. Start with that. You're meeting a person and you're trying to engage them in a normal human conversation, unless you meet one of the folks that Dr. Ades apparently knows.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Yes.
So when you're at a conference, especially, and I had people do this to me, right? Like, there's people like at a company, say you want to work at, like Google, for example, and I've had students come up to me and introduce themselves to me, say their name, and start going straight into a spiel about what their research was about.
Like an elevator pitch.
Yes, like an elevator pitch, like immediately. And I was like, who are you? I was just like, what do you want me to do with this information? That was my thought. But it happened a few people. I think that's what they were told networking was. Have your elevator pitch ready to go, and then just apparently go for it. Like very literally, I was sitting in the escalator with somebody going up, and the student started talking to me about like their research in something that I had no idea what it was. And I was like, what do you want? I was like, what do you want me to say? Do you want me to talk to you about this research? Because I'm unfamiliar with it. Or do you want a job? In which case, that's not how you ask for a job either. It was very strange. So like Leslie was saying, normal conversation. Like if you met somebody, anywhere, like at an event or, with friends or whatever. How are you? How's it going? What do you think about this conference? Or where are you from? Blah, 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 all those things. Yeah. Totally normal, totally nice. Get a conversation started.
There's a time and place for all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel my voice carries.
There are a few people online, so, and everyone online, feel free to ask questions too. We'll start.
Okay. Hi, it's me again. So is there an example of someone being too casual with you? Like, so you're saying be casual, but it's like, hey, Joe, you know, that might be, because it's... There's a professional way to interact.
We're not saying casual, okay? What's up? You know, no. What's up, prof? No, we're not saying that. There's a professional way to interact with somebody. You still would say Dr. So-and-so, right? I'm not going to reveal all the crazy stuff that happened to me last weekend when I was partying with my friends, right? Okay. So there's a conversation limit to things. And if you're not sure, I mean, this is a legit question. There also could be some cultural pieces here that we want to keep in mind about what are things that in the US we might not say and we might say, or what's okay to talk about, or, you know. So we'll keep those things in mind. But, you know, there are, you know, boundaries there. But don't confuse casual conversation you would have with a friend with this kind of professional environment casual talk. Yeah. That's a good point.
I feel like as someone who kind of was domestic, like born and brought up here, I feel like we're kind of socialized that way in our schools, but I've definitely met people, like international students in my program and other programs who don't get that, so I'm like, it's not something that's a universal, so I find that explicitly saying that is really helpful for people who walk up and dump their elevator pitch on you. But just a follow-up question I've had is, so I've heard a little bit of like almost contradictory advice, which totally makes sense in context, but I just wanted to like point to it and maybe get a little bit more clarification. So there's this idea of, you know, identifying exactly where you fit, almost like you're a puzzle piece fitting into a company's values, very kind of narrow in on how you are unique and special and fit there. But then there's also been some discussion of, you know, broadening your net and kind of being like, I don't know, almost a jack of all trades, for lack of a better word right now, of like having values that fit with many different places and many different homes. And so I'm wondering if like how you specifically as individuals have struck that balance in your own professional lives. If you could give some examples or, again, just some clarity.
I want to answer that, but I want to add something super quick to what Leslie was saying, because just the piece about going up to a faculty member or just someone in your field that's like really big, that takes practice. So if you mess up the first time,
they won't remember you.
Right, and like they might, depending, right?
Yeah.
So just,
a lot of people.
Yeah, it's okay to like, yeah, it's okay to like just take the L and then leave and then say, I'm gonna try this again. And now you have, it's almost like when you interview, right? Like the more times you interview, the better you get at it, because you might know what questions are coming. So I wanted to say that. So it takes practice, like you're never gonna get it right the first time. So just take what you learn and move forward with that. But I think going to the current question that was being asked, I think the way that I approached it was more of what you were saying, like the jack of all trades. And that's just that the reason for that was because I have, and I still do have, many interests. And so research interests, and also like just different types of interests in terms of like roles and jobs. And so I don't know, the way that I approached it, it was like meeting as many people as I could in different venues that were adjacent or interdisciplinary. And so I have like a couple of groups of peers and support and mentors and potential sponsors or people that would sponsor me from different areas. So I want to make sure that I'm actually covering my bases and have different people that I can look for support in different ways. So I have my colleagues at my department who I get advice generally in terms of like, hey, we're on the tenure track, what are you dealing with? But then I also have people that are like closer to my identity, people that I identify with, like being like first gen and Latina, right? All of those things. So I have different groups of people that I look toward for support, or I support them. based on what I'm looking for. So I guess like I approached it in a way that I was well-rounded to make sure that I have groups of people that were, one, discipline specific. So I have people specifically in computer science or computer science education, specific people at Macalester, specific people that are academics, but like not necessarily like at a liberal arts school, like they could be at an R1. So I think that was more important for me. I tried to cover all my bases and say like, not everybody's gonna cover my needs. And so I need different groups of people with different perspectives and expertise to sort of fulfill those.
One that was advocating for being a fit and matching with your values. I mean, it could be, too, that depending on the field that you're looking to enter. So I had a scientific background. I had a specific project as a PhD candidate. And I was fortunate in that my research, I stepped right into my position and I used my research to advance the programs in that company. I was viewed, I was lucky again that I was viewed immediately as an expert in something, that the company needed me to be successful. And that was because my research aligned, my values aligned with the company right away. And so I think it's probably case dependent, the type of degree you're getting, the type of job you're looking for. So I think there's a natural conflict in the message there. And I guess we want to say, try to figure out how it fits with you. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. But that's how it worked for me. I was very specific, I was a fit, and it turned out to be the best thing ever for me, so it worked really well. The other thing I would add real quick on the topic is, so I mentioned I was the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation for the College of Ag. And we work with a lot of companies as well, looking to license technologies through the university. Professors are doing research and then they license those to companies. And we bring in company sponsors to sponsor research programs, et cetera. And what we find is that those companies are looking for their next employees. They're looking for students to interview, to talk with, to see who's going to be my next employee. So one of the things to consider is the industry, or in academia I suppose as well, but industry in particular in my case, are looking for you. They want you to talk to them. They want you to come and say, here I am, I'm a graduate student at Penn State, and I'm starting to explore my career opportunities. Very general, right? And you'll get a positive response from them. There's no doubt. They're looking for people that are entering the workforce and hoping they can find the right fit. So you have a little bit of an advantage that people are looking for you as well.
So a plug. I hope this is still the same, and I'm going to look to my colleague over here. Penn State has the largest living alumni network. Thank you. Okay, great. That's Jennifer Tice. Thank you. But my question to the panel is more or less around sort of what advice would you give to students who are looking to sort of break into sort of spaces and how they advocate for themselves, particularly around the importance of DEI in their work and the fact that sometimes it doesn't show up in certain spaces. So what advice would you give to them on how to approach that, how to talk about that, how to manage their expectations around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first of all, it's also about, as far as I'm going to talk more from the industry kind of side of things, I think it's looking at the organization. So every organization is going to have a DEI statement. Okay. Well, if they don't, you definitely want to run screaming the other direction. Let's just put it that way. But every organization is going to have a statement. So that's not going to tell you a whole lot about what their true interests are. But you can ask. You mentioned they want you to talk to them. Right. Almost every company that I've posed this question to, and every time I do talk to an industry person, I ask them questions about their DEI initiatives. And every time I ask them, should students ask you directly? Because first of all, we have to understand that there's hidden identities and visible identities, and so I ask them questions about how should students ask these questions. I would say 99.9% of the time, a company person will say, we want you to ask these questions. Why wouldn't you ask these questions about the company that you're about to apply to, right? And so ask these questions, ask what you need to know to be comfortable in that space. So things along the lines of, health, for example, healthcare that is going to cover certain things, surgeries, partner benefits, whatever it might be. It could also be like, what kinds of employer resource groups do you have? Do you have employer resource groups for women, employees of color, et cetera, et cetera? In other words, support groups for employees. The other piece to ask about, so employers love to talk about, how many employees of color they have in their ranks. How many, if we're talking about STEM, how many women they have, right? That's great. Ask them how many of those people are working in higher positions, okay? Because it doesn't matter if all of those folks are in entry-level positions and therefore are not moving up the ladder. That's a huge red flag. So these are some of the things that you want to look for in organizations to really determine what's going on. Now, I said 99.9% of the time. The one time I asked an employer, it was an engineering firm, this is a recruiter, okay? So their whole job is to recruit. In other words, sell their organization on you all about why you should come and apply and work for them. They know everything about the company, they're supposed to. And I asked the question that I always ask, what kinds of support systems do you have in place for underrepresented employees to support and retain, et cetera? And he just stared at me. And I said, did you hear the question? Do you know, did you hear the question? Yeah, I don't really know anything about that. I have to ask somebody. This is a man he was there for 30 years, he was there for a while. It wasn't like he was a new employee. So yeah, that's a red flag right there. He didn't even know the answer to the question. So ask these questions. Feel free to ask these questions. There's another resource. Have any of you ever heard of the resource called LionLink? Nobody's heard of Lion. Oh, one person, two people. Okay, LionLink. So LionLink is a resource put together by Alumni Career Services. I know the director of Alumni Career Services would smack me for this because I'm going to describe it wrong, but it's a group of alumni and students who are volunteering their time to assist you as students and alum. And they're not career coaches, right? But they just are there simply to help you and answer questions. And it's a small database by Penn State standards. But what you could do, one of the features in there is, if I am in there, I'm in there and I can say that I am skilled at these different things, resumes and interviewing. The other feature is I might know about LGBTQ identities. I might know about underrepresented in STEM. I might know about international students. Doesn't mean that I identify that way, just to be clear, but I might be able to help guide you on these particular issues. And you can also sort these folks by industry as well. So talk about networking. This is low-hanging fruit because these folks are solely in this database to help you. And so you could look at these folks and identify them by these criteria and even in your industry and just point blank ask them, tell me what the situation is at this company or this industry. So that's another piece. But I can't stress enough how important it is for you to do that homework and really get to know as many people as possible in the industry and the company. And press these employers for the answers to those questions. If you need help with that, I'm available to help because I know these are sometimes difficult things to ask. But that's what I do. But it is a really incredibly important thing for you to know because you don't want to get yourself into those situations where you feel very uncomfortable. And I've seen it happen. So that was a very, very long answer too. I think I answered your question. I'm not even sure, did I answer your question, Dr. Preston? I went off tangent.
Sense of networking, you did, thank you.
So I wanted to add to the question that was being asked from the academic side. So if you're actually going up and looking for like tenure track positions, I would say follow the same approach, like make sure you have those questions. But remember, it's almost like you're a PhD student, right? Again, you're kind of going on campus visits, right? And you're giving job talks. And so what I would say is if you're interested in actually going to academia and going to the whole tenure track thing, those are questions that you ask, like if you get a campus visit, or even now they're doing hybrid visits for some positions. So make sure you have a chance to talk to the colleagues or your future colleagues maybe in that department and ask them those questions. Like, how are they doing, right? Like, when you have conversations with like the chair or like the provost, like, what are you doing for faculty of color? What are you doing about mental health and wellness? What are you doing about supporting equal pay, right? So those are things that, again, just from that side of things, if you're going on campus visits, make sure you, one, take a stock and look at like, are there any faculty of color if that's something that's important to you? And if nobody's there, then ask why, right? Like, I mean, there is, that is your answer, but also like, I would be more interested in knowing why, right? So I think thinking about the things that are of value to you and important to you, especially if you're gonna go on the tenure track search, asking those questions, and don't be afraid to do that, and anything else that might be important to you, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard some really good advice. The only thing I would add is kind of where can you find out about some of this information, when you go into the interview or when you're, starting your job. A lot of companies have what I would call formal mentoring programs where they have a lot of this set up already. So they have women in leadership or resource support groups, et cetera. So they're already there. Other companies don't. And you'll be walking in the door and even you could establish one on your own, if depending on the company, or you could raise the issues. So what do you want to do? Do you want to be part of a company that has established programs, or do you want to kind of break new ground and enter a company where you can have kind of the first say in some of the practices that you see? What I found is, particularly with large companies, you see what I would call a annual sustainability report. And so there's the annual report, which is the finances, right, mostly. And then now you see companies with an annual sustainability report where they talk about their sustainability efforts around environment, around social impact, but they also include the work they're doing in this area. The work we're doing for women in leadership positions, for underrepresented groups in the company. They talk about those activities in that report. So you can get a sense of, for large companies, what they're doing. But typically, medium and small companies, you might have a harder time, or you'll be breaking ground. And there's no set rule there. There's exceptions to everything, but in general, that's what I've seen as I look at this.
We have a question back here.
Hi, I'm Somdeep. I'm doing graduation, Masters of Landscape Architecture. Thanks for your time being here with us. I have actually two questions. One is very short, like the importance of the recommendation letter. When I supposed to send, like, is it like when I'm applying, just writing a letter like to whom it may concern? Or I also have previous work experience. Can it be considered as a recommendation letter, or means experience letter? What my previous boss wrote to me, yeah. I'm in good touch with all of them, yeah, so they can call. The second one is like, it's all about the instinct, like when you should stop knocking the door. Like, okay, I keep knocking someone, he's maybe not replying twice, thrice or something. And same thing happened for the interview purpose also, job interview. When I should say, okay, it's 2 months already, let it go, let's move on. Yeah, it's like, sorry for the long question.
Yeah. So we'll start with the question about reference letter. So there's two questions. recommendation letters, faculty, previous jobs? How do you decide? When do you ask? When you're applying, a year before? And then the second one is when you're trying to network or ask for the letters and you're not getting a reply, and you write back and said, hey, I haven't heard, sorry if you're busy. At what point do you stop? So the line between a pest and realizing, okay, I need to find someone else, versus not. And the same, you know, if you applied for a job and didn't hear anything, or.
Speak a little bit to that. As far as recommendation letter goes, I think if you are looking for someone to give a recommendation and you're on the job search, you have to tell them that you would like them to be able to speak to you, about you. Like, don't put somebody, oh, this person, agreed to do it 2 years ago, I'm gonna put their name down. The last thing somebody wants is some employer calling up, hey, I need a recommendation for Tiffany, and they're like, you do? I had no idea she was even looking for a job. Like, that's really bad, right? So you want to reach out to folks to ask them if they feel comfortable speaking about something very specific. So it needs to be something specific. It's like, can you just talk about my work? It's like, well, what exactly do you want? So say you have, the company is asking maybe for 3 references. Each reference should be able to talk about a different aspect of you. So they should get 3 kind of like separate accounts to make more of like a holistic picture of who you are. So if every recommendation is like, oh yeah, she worked on that project and it was fine. Oh, she worked on that project and it was fine. They're all just like, well, did you only do one project in your whole life? Like, we don't know. So it's very important to make sure that you're asking these people to speak about something specific that they have information about you on. So that's the other part, you want to make sure that that person can actually speak about you, rather than be like, oh yeah, we worked together, but I don't really remember, probably fine. That's not very strong, right? What you want instead is something like, yes, we worked on that project, she was an amazing leader, she did this and this and this, and it really moved us along. Like, that's what you're really looking for. So you want to make sure that the people that you're pinging for these types of things know exactly what the ask is, know the time frame that you're looking for the job in, so that they can expect, to be prepared to talk about you. And then what I do is, once I get to the stage where the employer says they're going to contact my references, is I send all of them a message. Hey, they're gonna contact you. It's gonna be within the next week. If you can't do this for whatever reason, let me know, but just an FYI, they're going to be reaching out. So that person can be very prepared for you. However, if you don't hear from somebody, if you ask and you don't hear from somebody, and it's crucial to have that reference, wait a week, ask again, just, hey, following up, not sure if you saw this or not, but I would love, to have you speak about my expertise in X, please let me know. And then, depending on how crucial it is, one more time, but after that, it's okay. You just have to, I think that goes back to also having a wider network, having people who can speak to you. If you need 3 references and you only feel really comfortable with 3 people, that's not super ideal, because one of them may not be up for it. So just make sure that you're always putting your feelers out there, working on different things, making that good impression with different people, because that will also help. That way, if somebody doesn't respond, it's like, well, whatever, I'll move on to the next excellent candidate.
Diversifying again, and say that sometimes maybe people don't respond the best over email. And so if you've tried email, maybe a phone call, or, I know that's, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to call somebody. So maybe if they're a texting type of person or whatever, but in other words, another type of communication might also be a way to go. But so try that. But yes, at some point you've just got to move on to somebody else. That's an important thing to just kind of remember, that's going to potentially have to happen. And
yeah, how persistent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
We've got about 5 minutes left for this part. So, any other questions out there? Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, perfect. Hi. Again, I just want to thank you for your time here, and thank you for being here. So I'm Antonio Girona. I'm a 3rd-year PhD student at the College of IST. And my question is in regards to how critical is it for you to, I guess, choose the path that you want to be on early? How early on should that be? Whether or not you want to go the academic route or you want to go towards the industry route. Because for me, I think it's different where there are benefits to both, and obviously there are going to be some negatives or cons for both. So I'm just wondering how early on in your PhD career should you decide, oh, I want to go into academia or when I want to go into industry?
Do you mind? So I think Tiffany and I were smiling because I feel like with every PhD student, I swear has this dilemma. And like my first 2-3 years of my PhD, I was pretty much set, like, I want to be a professor. But then I actually went to work for about 1.5 years in industry. I worked at Honeywell Aerospace for a little bit, and I did research there. And I really enjoyed it. And then I was like, yeah, so now I want to go into industry. And my advisor, funny enough, was like, are you gonna come back and finish? Like, are you staying? What are you about to do right now? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna come back. And I did. I came back and I finished. But yeah, I think that's really such a hard question, especially for someone like me. I have a lot of different interests, and I also don't want to pigeonhole myself. So I feel like I'm doing research now in a certain area, and I can only imagine that, like, that's going to evolve after a certain time. I might be interested in something else, and I think that that's completely normal. But I would say just try to, like, have different opportunities. So something that I tell my undergraduate students is that have different experiences. Make sure you do an REU, do a research experience somewhere, do an actual industry internship. Same thing for PhD students if you can. Try to get yourself in different areas. Teach. So you know, like, what your interests are, and that can make it a little bit better for you. Like, you might do a government internship and you're like, I hated that, but that's good because then you know you don't want to work ever in, like, the government maybe, right? So trying to, you know, put yourself in different experiences so you can suss out what you really like. Something that I've also seen super quick before I have one of my other panelists go is, I've seen people that don't want to let go of either. And so, like, I have colleagues who they teach and, you know, during the summers they consult in industry. Or, like, if you are in industry, similarly, you can be an adjunct and you don't have to let go of either passion, right? So I think it's just if you're willing to do that and you really care, like, you know, you can do both, right?
Something that my advisor told me, which I think actually looking back was really great advice, was that you should prepare yourself, if you're not sure, for the academic track. Like, prepare your portfolio for the academic track. Make sure you're publishing. Make sure you're doing all those things, the community service, all of that. Because it's way easier to back out of that and be like, okay, just kidding. I have a bunch of publications and they're all great, but I want to go to industry. Versus I plan this industry path, now I want to be a professor, but, you know, I haven't been really working super hard on any of the things that matter in academia. Like, it's much harder to build that academic profile. And if you're not sure what you want, go for it and build that. And then if you decide that you want to go towards the industry, you can just make that switch. I mean, that's basically what I did. Like, I wasn't sure either. I actually had a postdoc lined up. And then I got my offer at Google and I was like, goodbye dreams of research. See you later. But, you know, to that point, like, I'm still writing papers. I'm doing things like this, you know, I'm staying involved in that community in the event I want to go back, you know, because I did build, like, you know, a publication record for myself. I did teach a class, you know, all the things that would have been valuable on the tenure track. And then I decided that actually, you know what, like, I do love the industry. This was my dream job. And I just so happened to get offered it, so, like, let's go. But otherwise, I could have easily pivoted. So build yourself that, like, academic profile if you're not sure, because it's so much harder to not do that and then decide you want to go academic.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think it works the other way, too, in that if you're prepared to be in an academic position through publication and service, et cetera, and you do go to industry right away, I have a lot of friends that I know that were in industry for 2 or 3 years, and then came back, and then came to academia, but they had papers published and they had a record of service in the academic environment that allowed them to come back and get right back on the tenure track. The other piece of that is for me, of course, I was in industry for a long time, but Now there are a number of non-tenure track positions that are very, very rewarding. And so you can think about, I can spend some time in industry and come back to academia, and maybe I wouldn't be prepared for a tenure track position, but there are many non-tenure track positions that do teaching, some research, and service opportunities. So there are opportunities outside of tenure track that are good for, like me, are appropriate for industry to come back.
To know your field, because there are some fields where it is harder to move back into academics from industry. It's not impossible, but it's harder. So when you're at conferences, talk to people, take advantage if the professional organizations for your academic fields, the big organizations have whole professional development arms where you can learn about career pathways in the discipline. So you build those networks so that you can try to understand what potential limitations there might be. So we're actually at time to start the networking reception part. So, oh yeah.
Because I just want to sum up every great thing that everybody has just said.
Yeah, we need a summary here.
Here's the sum up.
Through the summary.
Here's the sum up.
Thank you, by the way.
Over my career, and I would bet a lot of people in this room with some professional experience can probably attest to this, I don't think I could have predicted where I would be right now. And so what I want you all to do is not get so tied up in where am I supposed to be, and can I do this, and can I switch back, and all this other business. I think, you go with, where you feel you need to be, and that's where you're supposed to be, which sounds ridiculously, I don't know, philosophical or whatever else. I'm not a philosophical person. But, I really believe in the fact that you really need to keep things open. And yes, it may be harder to jump back to academia. I'm not an expert in that. But one thing I have found is that careers are not a straight line. No matter what you think it's supposed to be, they're not. And that's the exciting part of it. So keep that in mind. Keep an open mind, have some interests, keep talking to people. That's the best thing. We talk about networking and sponsorship and mentoring. The best thing you can do for your life and your career is keep talking to people and let your career zigzag, and that's okay, because you will enjoy the ride a lot more if you just let that happen in that way and not just try to stick to this tough, straight line that you think you're supposed to have. That's my sum up.
Sure. So basically, just to make sure we got everything, the first thing was be personable, not personal. Don't share your personal business. Don't run up and talk to people and just tell them all about themselves. While it might be interesting, but we don't want to do that, right? And while we may fear spider webs, they're good, because Penn State, also plug here, has the largest living alumni network. You saw how I did that? Great, awesome. And then to move forward, jump in. We know that you might have imposter syndrome. You might have a fear of talking. Find a connection, find something, have a conversation. Don't just go in with compliments, okay? But you have to introduce yourself first. That's number one. And then become a collector of people. So when it comes to networking, sponsorship, and all of those other things, you're collecting people along your journey. They might not necessarily have the same identity as you. They might not necessarily have the same background or academic background or personal background, but become a collector of people and leverage your networking, use your social capital to put yourself forward. Any questions? I was a high school teacher. I got to make sure we bring it in. Thank you.
Final nuggets from other panelists?
And that's what I tell people whenever I mentor people all the time, is that no one cares about your career as much as you do. And basically by that, I mean, you need to take charge of your career. You can't leave it up to somebody else to, know what's best for you, or to think about you, or to be like, oh, I remember this person reached out to me a year ago and asked about an internship opportunity. They're not going to remember, but you're going to remember because you really care, right? So keep that in mind, and you are the agent driving your career. And you're the one who cares the most about it. Other people may be there along their way to help you, but ultimately you're in the driver's seat, and don't ever forget that. and like let that empower you to like, you know, make the decisions you want to make, to try things that you want to try, you know, to decide when you've had enough of something and you want to do something else.
My final word would be that developing a network and mentors and sponsors takes work. You need to take the time to work through what it means for you to have that successful network of people. But in the end, it will pay dividends and be well worth it.
I will also have a final word. And I guess what I'm going to say is, I guess, challenge yourself. So every time I go somewhere new, I almost make up like a quota for myself, like meet 3 people. Talk to 3 people meaningfully if you can. And you can do that in 1 second in the other room. Right.
So our challenge is talk to 3 people that you don't know. You can. This is a safe space. We've got fellow students here. I'm not going to say you have to talk to me. You can talk to 3 other students. Practice. That's why we're having events like this, is to help you practice and learn things before you're actually out there doing it. But being here is building your network. You took the time to come out and do this. We're going to have other professional development events during the year. We have ones where we're going to bring in people from companies. We have ones where we're going to have alumni there. Going there, everyone you meet, you never know who that one interaction is that could lead you in a totally path you never expected. That means that you do kind of have to be on in things like this, but take advantage of them. Penn State, the big alumni network, yeah, that's there. But things that go on campus, talks, if your department brings in speakers and there's opportunities for them to meet with grad students, volunteer to do that. So with that, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you at other events. If you can find your way through the website of the grad school, you can find some of them. We've got QR codes available where you can also find out about them. And keep an eye out in your email for also alerts and advertisements about events like this. So thank you. And thank you, panelists. This was fun.